Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing another video on the affidavit of support. I know I've done several videos on this in the past, so if this is your first time watching me talk about the affidavit of support, I strongly recommend watching those videos first because I do a much deeper dive into the affidavit of support requirements. Today we're going to be talking about some common questions I've received recently regarding the income requirements of the affidavit of support and the tax return requirements. The questions include, what if I didn't file a tax return last year? What if my income was like with a W-2 and a 1099, or I had self-employment income? How do I prove I make enough money? And some other related questions regarding requests for evidence when you file the affidavit of support and then USCIS wants you to submit additional evidence and they give you 87 days to do so. What should you do? If you're new to my channel, I'm Puyan Darian, a lawyer who focuses entirely on immigration law, and I make a video on a new topic every week, so here we go. The first question I'm going to answer is, what if you didn't file a tax return in the most recent tax year? Well, that can be a huge problem if you're currently trying to file a family petition and fill out the affidavit of support for an immigrant family member who's trying to become a permanent resident. If you were unemployed or retired last year, we still need to fill out an affidavit of support for you. You still need to submit the form, and on it we will indicate that you didn't file a tax return in the most recent tax year, and we will explain that you were not legally required to if you didn't make enough money, have sufficient income, depending on what the income requirements were. If you were single or married, it's like $12,000 for a single person. If you made less than that, then you might not have been required to file a tax return. It's different for married couples and it changes every year. 12,000 is just a ballpark for 2023. What happens if you just didn't file a tax return, but you were working? Well, that's a huge problem. You need to file a tax return so that we can submit the affidavit of support. If we don't file a tax return and you submit the affidavit of support and you were working and you made an income, USCIS is going to send you a request for evidence requesting your tax return. And it's not sufficient to reply and say, I didn't file one. I've never seen that work. Maybe another attorney has had success with that strategy, but I wouldn't gamble the approval of your green card application on that. I will always tell my clients that if they earned sufficient income and they were required to file a tax return, they should do so before we submit all the immigration paperwork, or it'll create major problems down the road. But let's take a step back to somebody who didn't earn enough income because they were unemployed or retired in the last tax year. Well, that person still needs to submit an affidavit of support, like I just said. We don't need to submit a tax return for them because they weren't required to file one, and we will explain that in the affidavit of support. But we will be required to submit an affidavit of support from a joint sponsor. This is going to be another person who's also signing and submitting an affidavit of support along with your affidavit of support. And this person also needs to prove that they are a green card holder or US citizen, and they need to submit their most recent tax return showing that they make enough money to sponsor the immigrant who's applying for the green card. A situation that I frequently see is somebody will file their adjustment of status, their green card paperwork by themselves without a lawyer, and then they'll get a request for evidence. And the request for evidence will be about the affidavit of support. So USCIS will say, we are requesting something because your affidavit of support was insufficient. But it's very unfortunate that the way that they do it, USCIS will send a very boilerplate request for evidence saying you haven't shown that you meet the guidelines for the affidavit of support, and they'll list several possible issues, but they don't specifically tell you what was missing. It could have been that you just failed to submit a single page of the tax return, or it might be that a W-2 was missing, or that the income on the affidavit of support was insufficient. But the way they do it is they send a request for evidence that doesn't really explain what was wrong. They just say that you don't meet the requirements and you have 87 days to submit evidence that you qualify. And people will hire me at this point, and I'll just redo everything in an overabundance of caution. So what I mean by that is I will submit the petitioner, the US citizen spouse or petitioner's affidavit of support with their tax return. And if they use a joint sponsor, I'll also submit that joint sponsor's affidavit of support with a complete tax return. I'll act as though we previously submitted nothing with regard to the affidavit of support, and I'll redo everything, because if that request for evidence is replied to, if we send a response and it doesn't meet all of their requirements, you're not going to get another request for evidence. You're going to end up getting a denial decision, and you're not really going to be able to successfully appeal the decision if it was correctly based on your incomplete affidavit of support. And so you'll end up losing up to $1,760 and a bunch of time, and you'll have to refile everything. So whenever my clients or I am in this position, in an overabundance of caution, I will refile everything so that USCIS has no argument to deny the application. The affidavit of support is arguably one of the most complicated parts of the entire family-based immigration process. I know people who are capable of doing the entire process without a lawyer, but the affidavit of support is always the part where I warn them, like, you know, if you do decide to do this whole thing by yourself, at least consult with me or an immigration lawyer before you submit the affidavit of support portion. Or if you end up getting a request for evidence regarding the affidavit of support, now is the time to pay a lawyer to help you, because it's very difficult to respond to these requests for evidence. And it took me years to figure out how to do it in a way that's not going to get denied. And it's not worth it to try to do that by yourself when for several $100s or whatever a lawyer costs, you can have a lawyer fix it all for you and save you a ton of time and refiling the very expensive forms all over again. If you guys are interested in applying for the family-based immigration process, or you recently received an affidavit of support request for evidence, or you have any other family-related immigration issues, please feel free to consult with me. I'll speak with you directly. We'll create a game plan, and if you want, I'll represent you during the entire process. If you're new to my channel, be sure to like and subscribe. I put out new videos on a weekly basis, and I'll see you guys next week for another video.